from college and people from, all over your life, from every job you've ever had. And maybe not the painting job when you were in college, but like everybody
Oh, no,
else.
I still keep in touch with Joe, yeah.
See? He keeps them
But,
all.
I mean, I don't know. It's probably there's some deep-rooted issues there is probably what's really happening.
Don't forget me. You're like, don't forget me.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Maybe some of that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Jason knows Peter Joseph.
Ah, I know Peter Joseph. Isn't that a coincidence?
Right. And I think that's actually how we got connected, right, Jason? I feel like it is.
So it was actually Bill Icost.
Oh, Bill. Yeah,
Oh,
Bill.
Bill, my
that
biggest
introduced us.
fan.
But Peter and I go back a number of years.
Yes. Yeah, Peter worked right out of college, and we worked in the same office. He was early on in a creative, but he was right out of school, so he didn't know what he was getting into. But that's life. That is life. So welcome, Jason, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Why don't we start? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself,
Yeah.
like how you got
I
into
know
RevCycle?
nothing.
Yeah, Tina knows nothing.
We've just met at a cocktail party. So Jason, what do you do?
So
Sorry.
I'm the vice president of revenue cycle for Wellstar Health System. We're a 11 hospital health system in Georgia, and got into revenue cycle 10, 12 years ago. Started off in operations, running clinical services, various jobs in acute care, academic hospitals, and people love it. And somehow landed in
Didn't
revenue
love
cycle.
it. Yeah, neither did I. Jason, what did you go to school for though? Like when you were left high school and into college, what were you like, oh, I'm gonna do this?
I mean, I wanted to be a doctor. I
me
had this
too.
dream of
Mhm.
being an ophthalmologist. My father's an optometrist, and I wanted to work with him. And then I got to college and had way too much fun. Would have had to go to school for many, many years to get into that school. So I studied sociology and political science. It was just
I love it. Liberal arts
majors I enjoyed.
education. That's right.
Don't encourage it,
Major-
Tina.
I'm like, that's right.
things I enjoyed and could still graduate in 4 years with. And so
It was
Those were the,
strategic. Let's call it what it is.
those were the
But,
requirements. I could graduate. Remember back then, though, dude, it was like, I was just talking to my wife about this. Like, everybody was on a 5-year plan. Like, to get out in 4 years was like a miracle. And so I was like, I got to figure out how to get out in 4 years. I can't do this 5-year thing. I can't afford it. I was paying for college by my own. So,
well, that was my issue, and why I didn't want to go for 5, 6 years to qualify for med school, and then I started doing math about actually graduate.
right.
Yeah, it wasn't in the cards. But during college, I got to do an internship with the CEO of a hospital, and at the time, I just fell in love with administration, the challenges of running the business of healthcare.
Sure.
And so then ended up going to GW for my master's in healthcare administration, and falling into the administrative route, which I did for a number of years, but as I said, did not. And so what is
Well, that's right. We had that in common. I got into GW. And then I realized how much it was going to cost me to live there. And I was like, this is not happening. So I ended up at VCU. Actually, Jason, I'm going back next week to talk to the students and do a talk on RevCycle. They asked me to
that's
come
so
back.
cool.
And yeah, so I haven't been back in a long time. It'll be fun.
Are they asking you to talk about revenue cycle because the students just don't know what that is? Since
Yeah, they don't get any.
It's the thing we don't talk about.
It's unbelievable. I get 4 semesters of finance, or 3, and that's finance. Like, I get why we do it, but it's like it's not RevCycle. Like, that's a totally different thing. So I did a talk like probably 10 years ago there, and these students were just like, "What the?" They had no idea what I was talking. I mean, they were just like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever heard." I'm like, "I know, right? This is nuts. This is what's going on in your organization. You don't even know." So
It is an interesting point, though, because my first job was I was managing physician practices and hospital outpatient departments, and I had no clue how the financing and
No.
reimbursement of healthcare worked. And so it was a big shortcoming in my ability to do my job, even on the administrative side. So I do think it's a big miss of the graduate programs, not educating people on the reimbursement revenue cycle, because it would make their decisions as administrators better.
Yeah, I mean, I argue that most CFOs have no clue like how it actually runs because I would say 80% of them didn't grow up in rev cycle, so they don't really know. They grew up in finance or like accountants. Like that doesn't equate. It's not the same thing at all. So it's like, yeah, these are VPs of rev cycle usually report to a CFO who doesn't actually understand it completely. So there's that disconnect. I don't know if your experience is that same way, but
In prior organizations, absolutely. I think we're lucky here at WellStar to have financial leadership that's very well versed in revenue cycle, which is both a blessing and a curse.
maybe a little too much information.
You can't toss out an acronym and pretend they
I
don't
mean,
know what
the
it is.
APR and the RTC. I mean, we just have these things, and they're like, "What the? Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, great." Just
Yeah, our CFO actually just retired, but there was no glossing over numbers with him. He wanted to see your formula, your detail. He knew it better than I could ever, but I appreciated it, and it did help.
Yeah, for sure, right. Well, most of them if they've lived and grown up in it, they understand. Like, I mean, you can make a change today, but you won't know for real if it's like 3 months from now, maybe. Like, sometimes it just works that way, Cool. So you got to a couple hospital or physician practice. You're doing apps. You're like, I did the same thing. It was like, this is not my bag of tricks, but I stuck it out for 5 years, which I can't believe. What did you do next then?
Yeah, so I had a desire to learn revenue cycle and didn't know where to go or how to do it. Um, I landed at one of the Medicare wrap overpayment audit recovery firms, working for insurance companies, auditing and looking for overpayments. They really taught me revenue cycle. I got to look at the data for every major commercial payer in the country and look at the contracts and or reimbursement and see how all that works and got put together. I also really got to learn analytics because at the heart of it, this was a data firm.
Sure.
And so, really got my hands in machine learning modeling and other forms of analytics that I'd never been exposed to. And I really fell in love with, again, the business of healthcare and ultimately revenue cycle. I had intended on doing that work for a couple of years. It ended up being 6 because I was having so much fun. But I always knew I'd come back to a provider organization. It was always my passion, and I like helping communities and feeling a part of organizations that are actually doing some good, not just earning a profit.
That was at Cotivity? Did I read that right?
Yeah, originally it was Connolly. It was owned by a small family who really kind of pioneered the overpayment audit recovery business. And it was a small company. That's why I liked it so much. You were able to be really creative, come up with interesting ideas. I had developed a lot of the intellectual property at the time, writing a lot of the algorithms and the specific audits that we performed. And I loved it. It was great. Combined my knowledge of healthcare operations, which helped me in that regard, but taught me again what a claim was, how claims are formed, how you bill for services, how insurance companies work, and ultimately how they process claims, which has helped me tremendously as I returned to the provider world and brought trying that to my friend versus taking it away.
Yeah. So what did you do from there? So why did you end up leaving?
Yeah, because ultimately I left because the company went through a number of mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
The culture changed, the compensation changed, and it just wasn't fun anymore. I had only stayed that long because I was having so much fun. And then as it happened, I looked to transition back to provider, which took me a while. It was not easy to convince someone to give me a revenue cycle leadership role when I had never done it before. But I got a job at an academic medical center, a standalone tertiary care academic medical center, and founded a revenue integrity department, which really fit well with what I'd been doing at Cotivity, because I got to just be creative. They didn't really have a model or design for what revenue integrity should be.
Right.
So I got to just find opportunities and be creative and drive value. It was also, I got hired right before they went live with Epic, about a month before their go live, and it was a historically bad go live, which at the time was painful, but my career has helped me so much. Having gone through that recovery, that's when I met Peter and got to work with Healthrise and
Oh, that's right. That was my last week.
okay.
I don't know, Tina, if you remember this, but they like I was gonna be done, Jason, and they were like, "Can you stay?" They like begged me to stay on and go out to Cooper. I was like, "Okay." I'm assuming that's what we're talking about, but
Yep.
I went out there and I was like, and I remember being in one of those meetings with, I don't know, I don't remember who, but it was, nice people. And they were just like, well, this is what Epic told us to do. And I was like, what? Like, who told you that? They said, this is what happens everywhere. I'm like, what, one place? Like, I'm like, oh my God. And I don't remember what it was, but I would just remember going like, who in the world would tell you that? No one should ever do that. It was those kind of things.
Yeah, it was really bad go live. Nothing other than charging, which selfishly I'll take some credit for it since I was over when well. I showed up about a month before. Nothing was ready. We were in bad shape. And ultimately, I made a decision to consolidate all supply charges and all pharmacy charges other than items that had a specific kickback. We rolled it all into Lumen Board. And that was the thing that saved us from a charging standpoint. It really made the charging simple and easy.
Right.
We were back to baseline within 2 distant states. And so charging went beautifully, but then we went, 6 months without being anything. A whole host of other problems. And yeah, but it was a great learning experience. I mean, you can't learn outside experiences like that. But the same.
Oh, I agree. That was, I don't know if you remember, you probably don't, I don't know if you know this, but our first health drive started because we ended up at a health system that had implemented 2 of the 4 hospitals. And we got there and we had to have like the sit down, like within a month that we had to be like, you cannot roll these other hospitals out. Like we had to, like RevCycle, we basically stopped. They were not fans of everyone else was like, IT group hated us because they were like, we can't stop this. I'm like, no, we can't go any further. You're just gonna screw the rest of us. It's like, this can't happen. I feel like those were the days of like Epic was not good at implementations. I have heard that it's much, much better now. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I still hear mixed, stories. I think, yeah, a lot of it depends on who your implementer and the team is. And I think the organization's comfort and understanding of Epic.
Yeah, like they may not be ready. I mean, what we were finding back then was, I remember it being like, well, who's on your team? Oh, well, they had this one person, they had 4 of their people were within a year. Their year out of school, they've only been at one other implementation or none. And you're like, what? Like, so when they had, everyone does this, it was like, well, with this one client we had last time, which is my only client, which they don't tell you, right? I'm like, oh, well, this makes more sense.
I do think it's gotten better too.
Yeah, that has to improve.
Well, and also Epic now controls such a large portion of the market share that they don't have as many simultaneous implementations going on.
Yeah, back then, oh my God, how many were going on? It was like that 2000, was that 11, 10, 11, 12, 13 was unbelievable.
So just in the Philadelphia region, it was Cooper, Jefferson, and Penn all going live at the same time.
And you're the smallest of the 3 of those.
Yeah.
So you're going to get the leftovers. Sorry, that sounds bad, but those people I'm sure are great.
Oh, look at you. That's very sweet.
Well, I mean, I don't know, Tina, I'm watching this new show. It's not new, it's an older show. It's called Loudermilk. Have you seen this? It's from the guy who was at Office Space. Yeah. It's great, but he's so antagonistic about everything. So it kind of reminded me of that. I'm sure you're fine. Yeah. Anyways, I digress. That's good. I mean, I would say too, I learned a ton. I had to go get Clarity. I remember I had to go get Clarity certified because no one could pull a report. You couldn't get any data. The IT was group. No one else is pulling any data unless you're Clarity certified. I'm like, what the? Do you understand what just happened here? 40 people had access to pull reports when it was envisioned. Now you're saying 2 people do. That makes literally no sense. There's no way you could answer all the requests. Because the 2 people you have reporting reports, they were nice people. They were learning how to build great reports, right? Like, it wasn't like they had 20 years experience. I remember I had to bring in a guy at a, consulting agreement. And he was like, I want to say he was like $300 an hour, but he saved our bacon because he knew everything about how to pull reports. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's not much easier.
Oh, okay.
13 years later. I mean, it's somewhat easier, but listen, it's the best workflow system out there, and so it's built to drive workflow. It's not necessarily built to drive analytics and reporting. And so, they made it easier, and it's definitely better, but it's still not. You still have to create a lot yourself and have that expertise.
Yeah.
So,
and if you knew me back then, like having me be the person that got Clarity certified probably didn't make a lot of sense, but it's all right. I was decent with Excel. No Peter Joseph, that's for sure. He's a nerd. He's a nerd wizard. I don't even know.
I like that stuff too.
I figured you guys would get along.
Like Jason just has like this really optimistic, I don't know, shiny side of the penny outlook on this whole thing. I appreciate it so much.
It's not fun being negative or upset all the time. And
I agree.
Our jobs
Jason.
and our lives and revenue cycle are stressful enough that, I definitely try to foster, personally, but professionally as well, just positivity, because we work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It's already hard enough without being happy. Having some fun.
Right.
And Ben knows this, like, we're mired in, our recovery from the change incident. Funny for me to be depressed and or very upset about, but it doesn't do any good. It certainly doesn't help my team. Just gotta smile and keep plowing forward.
Is that something that's always have you always been that way, or is it like you've I've had to learn this behavior?
I've had to learn it.
Interesting.
Part of why I stopped, and fell out of administration was I got very frustrated, angry, and had no patience. So definitely, age helps mature and calm down. But no, it's definitely something I've had to work at. I think as you rise in leadership, you have to make a conscious decision about what type of team and environment do you want to foster, and ultimately drive it. And I've worked so much; it's such a big portion of my life. My personal self and professional self have merged over the years to be one, and definitely a much more positive person than it was before.
I was talking to another VP of RevCycle yesterday, and he was telling me how he had gone from consulting for his whole career, like 16 years, and then now he's VP of RevCycle at this place, and he's 5 years in, and he goes, another friend of mine told me when I started, he said, you're going to, about as high as you can get on the wins is about as low as you can get on the lows. And he's like, so don't make it you can't go too crazy on either side. You have to basically stay within because if you do that, you'll stay for a long time and you'll make it. And he goes, I didn't really totally get it when he said it. And he's like, I've been here 5 years now. And he's like, now I totally get it. It's like, you kind of have to just keep yourself like even keel. Yep, this is great. And then celebrate it for a couple of minutes and move on. And he's like, but with the same thing with things that are hard or things that are losses, it's like, you can't go crazy. If you go crazy and the emotions are all over the map, like people just can't manage it because there's too much. It's I don't know if did you ever do consulting, Jason? Did you ever do?
No. I've done vendor work for Productivity. I did work for another vendor in the RCM space, but no, never consulting.
Well, the thing about consulting that most consultants who have never done an ops job, and mind you, they're working with operations people, and they're always like behind the scenes, they're kind of complaining like these people just don't move fast enough, like they just don't get it, like we have to get stuff done, they just have no. And I always tell them the difference is like the difference in a consulting engagement is like it has a definitive window where there's a start and there's an end, and even if it's long, it's like could be a year, maybe it's long, but it's like there's an end to it, and there's like and then you're going to go on and you're going to maybe even take a break, and then you go to the next thing that's a new thing. It's like, I said, but these people are here. They're dealing with all the stuff. And there's a bunch of momentum when you're there because they paid for it. Right? But as soon as you're gone, it's like that wanes. And then it's like, yeah, we have to get stuff done, and it's like it's like continuing to go. There's no, peaks and valleys. This is what is basically consulting is, significantly in the nth degree.
Well, I also think people who don't work in business offices or haven't don't realize how much else there is that we do other than just revenue cycle. Revenue cycle really is internal consultants for the organization. I mean, any new business development, any open question, we're involved and we're doing the modeling on the revenue. We are, knee deep in every activity of the health system, which I think gets lost and isn't recognized by people that haven't done it before. There's a lot more than just getting claims out the door and collecting cash that we do to support our organizations that have to take priority at times.
Right. All right. So let's go back to your storyline. You're doing an Epic install. It's all going good. What do you do from there? I mean, I guess it's all going good at some point. You got claims out after 6 months.
Well, big thanks to HealthRise for support there.
Oh,
and,
shout out!
Big shout out. Because it was a great learning experience for me. They helped me learn Epic, and I helped some of them to learn operations, and I think it was a great partnership. But I was at Cooper for a few years. I will say that baseball went so poorly that there was, sweeping leadership changes throughout the organization. At the time, and I'm happy to admit it, I was passed over for the vice president job. Again, being young and impetuous at the time, that I didn't like that. And so I wanted to show, stick it to him and show him,
look what I'm capable of.
That's right. And I went out and got a VP job, and, in hindsight, both best and worst decision I ever made. In the near term, it was the worst decision I had made because the organization I went to was not a stable, positive organization. They had been through 3 or 4 VPs of rev cycle in 2-year period. Didn't realize
that's a lot.
It is. It was a small health system in Pennsylvania that was owned by a large national for-profit chain, and they didn't know anything about the for-profit chain. They were relatively new, and not much was publicized about them. But I was there for 11 months. Horrible experience. The person that hired me quit 3 weeks into my tenure, saying, "I don't know if you should stay here. I'm out." And I still trying to make my point and stick it to people, and so I toughed it out for 11 months. But ultimately, we learned, and only learned through the paper. The company lied to me and many other people, but they had taken the owner of the company took a debt finance dividend, paid himself significantly, and nearly bankrupted the company. And, that's one thing. Listen, it's your business. You want to do that. But he did it at the expense of patients. As I was rounding on the floors of my hospitals, patients were on beds without linens or canceling procedures left and right because we're on credit holds from our suppliers. Nurses are crying that they don't have the supplies they need to care for their patients.
Oh, my God.
And then, so that was happening. We're asking questions like, corporate office, what's going on? They're saying, oh, it's just temporary cash flow problems, nothing to worry about. Then newspaper articles start coming out detailing what's going on. And within a week of the newspaper article coming out, I put my notice in. Because I did not get into healthcare to harm people, not make a difference in our communities, and to benefit people. So didn't have a job, but knew I couldn't stay there.
Right. There's so much here. I mean, and I say that because I had not a similar experience, but an experience where it's like, yeah, I took a job. It was the best thing I ever did and the worst thing. And I put my family in a situation that wasn't good, right? And so you have all those things of like, I should have seen this coming. And so I don't know if you had that feeling or that guilt.
Well, in hindsight, of course, it's like, wow, I should have thought more about why I 4 VPs come through this place in 2 years. And I should have, maybe talked to a few more references, because I did know other people who had been there. But I was so focused on my own personal feelings of, being treated unfairly and not getting what I
Yeah.
felt I deserved. Because I did
Right.
a lot of work for Cooper to help them through that go live. Really went above and beyond, in my opinion, from an effort standpoint, and felt I had earned it. But yeah, absolutely. In hindsight, I should never have taken that job. But it ended up being the best thing, because without that job, I wouldn't have landed here at Wellstar, and I've never been happier. So, I think things do work out. As I like to believe, back to Tina, to your comment of positivity, I like to think and believe that good things happen to good people. It may not be today, but eventually, in the totality of things, will work out more positively for good people than not. And so, but yeah, really challenging. Same thing for my family, really challenging time. I was not happy, with the normal, I would say, bouts of depression around
Yeah, where was
the
your
state of my career, and just
where was your headspace at that point? Like, if you kind of like took stock of like, was it like, not maybe imposter syndrome, but you're just kind of like, oh God, like what am I gonna do now? I mean, where were you kind of like headspace? I'd be curious
yeah,
to.
less imposter syndrome. I've always had a lot of confidence.
Sure.
I know I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I think I stack up fairly well against most people, and so I've never lacked confidence. But it was that. I think the reality is, if you want to be a vice president of a revenue cycle, there's only so many jobs. They don't come open very often. They're challenging to get. I had young children in school. I didn't want to relocate them, which I ultimately ended up having to do. So yeah, and it was more. My feelings were more related to my perceived at the time failings to my family, just what I was doing to them, because of my own aggressive nature and desire for advancement, which are all personal feelings and personal wants, but without impacting my family.
Everyone gets impacted.
Yeah. So tough time, but I think that's when we, tough times is when we lean on our peers and our friends and colleagues. A former VP of Recycle Cooper, who I consider a dear friend and mentor, I had over to my house, and I was just telling him the whole situation. He was working at Ends Live at the time, and was able to give me a soft landing spot, and ultimately get me a job that I could do, and not relocate my family at the time, and kind of assess what I wanted, where I wanted it, and figure things out. So yeah, there was definitely some challenging years. I
Just
also
read an
bought the house
article.
that I couldn't
Sorry to
afford.
interrupt
Oh, no, it's okay.
Oh no! Oh no!
So yeah,
well,
so all kinds of things going on at the time. But Tina, I apologize, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry about the house. No, I was just reading an article the other day about actually what it takes to be successful, and one of the two, I think the two questions was to ask yourself, what do you really want? Like the two questions you just said were what do you really want? What do you really want to do? Not not like a job title or a thing, but how do you want to feel in that place? And I think clearly you have gone through that and landed successfully through that self-assessment. And I think maybe had you done that before you were insisting you were ready to be VP of Recycle, I insist. Maybe that would have been beneficial. But as you said, I always say this, and I probably read it somewhere, my feet have brought me here, right? So it's hard for me to look back at my life and say oh, this was a terrible mistake, or I regret that, because ultimately I've landed in a really wonderful place. So, I mean, congratulations to you. You've landed in a wonderful place.
But I
and
do
your
agree
kids
with
are fine.
They are doing well, yes. But I do agree with the statement you said. That first job, I was not ready for. Not anywhere close. You don't realize how much you don't know until you're in a situation faced with a decision, a question, and you sit back and say, I have no idea how to answer this or what to do here. I tend to thrive in those situations. I like that pressure, and I have no problem asking questions and learning from people, and asking again for assistance or help. But I was not ready to that first VP job, especially going to a place that had antiquated technology, extremely manual processes, require a deep understanding of the actual detail of rev cycle, which up to that point, I mean, I was working for insurance companies and then doing some rev integrity work, which was all over the place. I mean, charging in CDM, but clinical denials. I was running at the time for Cooper because they had problems, and I would say, fix them and kind of assumed responsibility. So I was literally all over the place, but had no idea like some of the major things you would need to know to be in a position of a VP.
Yeah.
But it's also this one of the things where it's like, as we grow, I don't know if you're doing any mentoring back at like George Washington, but I'm doing some at VCU, trying to, and I'm talking to these, they're second year students that are going to go do residencies, and I think what the vibe I get from them is very like, I gotta have this figured out what I'm doing. And like, this residency is so important. I'm like, is it? Like, man, like, just like, it's almost like what we're putting into the, like, especially in graduate school, I feel like they're like, you got to have your 5-year plan and you got to figure out where you're going to, and this is so important that you land like, and what I tell them is like, what's important? Find a preceptor that's going to invest in you and engage in you that you fit with. That's the most, it doesn't matter where they're at. It could be at like a community hospital. That shit doesn't matter. And I think that's like, because in your case, think about all the infrastructure that was in place at some of the places early on that was actually probably more important than even the role. It's like, no, I had people around me that actually really were helping me, or it was. And then I got to a place where it was like, they don't have any infrastructure that can support me, because that's a whole different experience. It's like being in the NBA, right? It's like Kate Cunningham, where I'm a Pistons season ticket holder, right? It's been a bad couple of years. Kate Cunningham's this rookie, right? It came in a couple years ago. He's got no one around him. And it's actually a pretty bad organization run, right? And so that's a different situation than somebody who goes and they're playing, on the Celtics, who which was the best team in the NBA this year, and it has been historically been very good. And so it's like, those are two different types of situations. So
very
I
much.
don't know. I've thought a lot about this, because I feel like what happens right now is people feel like they got to have it figured out and have like the next thing, or they have this desire to like have this role, whatever that role is.
So it's interesting. I totally agree with you, because some of my feelings early in my career stemmed from grad school and that, pressure. I think what we've seen also is, a continued specialization in healthcare. So, to advance, they want you to have 5 years of neurology service line experience to get a director of neurology,
Right.
And so, there's a lot of pressure felt to get the job. I also felt like graduate school prepared me more for senior level roles than it did for the roles that I was going into. And so that comfort was in the higher level roles that I was chasing very early in my career, because that aligned with my education. And I felt much more comfortable in a boardroom or with the A team than I did,
in ops, managers, like a small, just like middle manager role. I don't know if you had this experience. I did, but I was like, my residency was with the CEO of a health system. And so I got invited to like everything related to that, right? The Christmas party for, CEOs it puts on, all the golf outings. I'm in boardrooms. I'm on a board retreat. I'm like, this is the best. Like, I'm great at this. And then I took like a middle management job, and they didn't invite me to any of that shit anymore. I was like, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. I was like totally forgotten, not in the loop anymore.
Oh yeah.
It was so different. I'm like, this is like jarring how different it is.
I had the same experience. I did my fellowship up at Northwell Health in New York. Back then it was North Shore Island Jewish Health System. But I mean, amazing experience. But same, we're in board meetings. I'm going from hospital to hospital, working in the C-suite and doing capital projects and all these amazing things, learning so much. And then I went and was a manager of 10 physician practices, and it was a union shop. And it was very different than what I'd been doing. I was not prepared and didn't love it. And that was really then again chasing jobs and elevation to get back to what I had and what I, felt I'd be better at. And of course, we learned the hard way. I didn't need to do the hard work and do all the job to be ultimately good at those C-suite positions and
Yeah,
to
I also
ultimately
think we
lead an
looked at, I don't know if
organization.
you did this, but I looked at my classmates and was like, oh my God, one of my classmates is a COO already. And I'm like a middle manager in some stupid department, surgery. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I remember having that conversation like with myself, like my own talk of like, what am I doing differently? And I look back on that now though, and I say, God, thank God I had that experience. It sucked. I hated surgery. I hated working with surgeons. But to this day, I could walk into a hospital and I know what it's like to be a middle manager. I have immediate street cred with them. Like, I did this. Like, I know exactly how to do it's like, and I know what it's like. I knew I didn't want to do it too. I think that's the other thing is people don't get like when people are struggling figuring their career stuff out, I'm like, what don't you want to do? That's the easiest thing to put down. And if you can't even get that down, then you don't know what you want. You're never gonna get to like what you want to do.
No, I agree. I agree. It was interesting, and I felt that way for many years. Every 3 years I would be looking for that next job, to try to advance and elevate for the sake of elevating. Not necessarily because I was ready or because I knew I wanted to do.
Because you were unhappy. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I was actually pretty happy, but I felt like I should be moving to the next thing. I talked to one of the alumni of our program. He's like a year out. It's like, and I swear to you, the conversation went just like this. He was like, well, I'm this is what I'm doing. He actually was in rev cycle work, and he was like, I'm just not like, it's not moving fast enough. I feel like I should be doing all those other things, and this is going nowhere. And I'm like, how long you been doing this job? And he's like, oh, I just got done with year one. I was like, dude, you're a year in. This is like the time to put it in and do the work. Like, what are you talking about? There's no expectation for you to be a COO. Don't look at your classmates. Because most of my classmates weren't ready to take those jobs, even if it was a small place. And I had talked to them, and they'd be having almost a mental breakdown.
Well, I know, like my class, we were a mix of different ages and experience. So there were people who were already fairly high up in their organizations, came back and got their masters, and then parlayed that into COO or CEO jobs very quickly. Yeah, and it was hard because you do want to naturally compare yourself.
Yeah.
I still talk to my peers, for my graduating class, and they were all doing wonderfully well, and I still remind myself that I am too.
Well, Jason, this is what I tell people. And Tina remembers this. I hired one of my classmates at Healthrise. And I think about like, and they said this to us when we got to grad school. They like, you never know who you're going to work for, or who you're going to be a boss of, or who's you going to hire. Is like, you never know. Like, it might be someone 2 years, 3, 4 years from now that's just going to go to school, and 10 years from now you're working for them. And I was like, that's 100% true. Like, you never know. All right, so you have this like life-changing experience. This super negative, like, kick in the gut. You built a house you could not afford, which we've all done something similar. And then you kind of get a landing spot, which is good. Like, you're just kind of picking up the pieces, getting yourself back to status. Then how does the Wellstar thing happen?
Yeah, so I was at N5, actually leading a sales team. So I had never done sales before.
Okay.
But the guy who hired me, which he and I have stayed very close, he really wanted a true consultative sales approach. And so, I was managing the sellers, but really my job was to go in and do discovery, to handle those initial conversations since, I actually understood the business. And at the time, that was N5 before they had split. They had, 50 some odd products. It was very hard for someone who didn't really know rev cycle to go in and carry a conversation and understand which of the products align to the business need of the potential client. And so I was doing that. I was loving it. I was actually having fun. I was flying all over the place, meeting new, CFOs and VPs of rev cycle, selling a few things and actually enjoying it. And then the pandemic hit. And I did not like sales so much when there was nothing to sell.
No.
They
That's
got
harder.
my leaders were comfortable just walking their dog, playing around a golf, doing whatever it is. And I mean, I sat in front of that computer for 10 hours a day, every day, trying to do something, and not, yeah, I realized sales wasn't for me long term. Once I knew it from the beginning, but that was certainly crystallized going through that experience. Another vendor experience with divestitures and changes in companies structure, which wasn't fun. And so then I just started looking for provider roles, and I wasn't necessarily set on being a VP. I was just looking for, I think finally it matured enough to look for the right organization. So find the right group of people. I wanted an Epic shop because I didn't enjoy working on
Sure, you knew
some
it.
of the older mainframe systems. They going kind of backwards in technology, and so I was looking for Epic shops. Ideally, 2 million or bigger, in major metropolitan areas. And just started a job search and started, applying out to places. Wasn't having much success. The job at Wellstart came open. It was an assistant vice president of the HV side, hospital billing and AR. I applied, and then it was actually thanks to Peter. Peter knew the VP here at Wellstar. I reached out to Peter and said, would you mind putting in a good word for me? And through that reach out, was able to get the interview and had a very long recruiting cycle. It was about 7 months of interviews on and off. And there were a number of things going on at Wellstar at the time that kind of lengthened that out. But ultimately secured the job and came down. I've had a few of these interesting experiences where, I got hired by someone who put in their notice. I didn't tell me during the interview cycle. And so literally after I'd accepted the job, the CFO calls me and is like, here's the deal. I was already kind of pot committed at that point, and so still came down. I had about 5 hours of overlap with the VP here. He walked out, and we just got to work, trying to figure things out. But they had a lot of turnover, so multiple AVP positions were open at the time. The VP position was open. Things were not in a great place, and we got to work. But
did you have a little PTSD there? Were you just a moment of like when you got that call from the CFO? You must have been like, "Oh shit, I just did the same thing." I mean, you had to have had a little in your back of your mind.
A little bit, but I would say my conversation with him was so positive. And I could just tell the kind of human being in person that he was. And so that's ultimately what sold me and still, convinced me to come and move my family not 900 miles to a place where we didn't know anyone, no family, no friends, to try it. And it was the best decision I could have made. That gentleman who just retired 2 days ago.
Oh wow!
Best CFO I ever worked for. I learned so much from him in these 3 years, and it really is. Wellstar is a really special organization. Very similar to Northwell in terms of just progressiveness in what we're doing, the way we treat people, and the thoughtfulness with which we as an organization treat people. I couldn't have asked for a better spot. So, but yes, definitely. I've had a few interesting. I didn't even go into how what happened when I started at Cooper. It's not as nice or funny of a story, but the gentleman that hired me on my orientation day called me out of orientation to tell me that he had just been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh my God.
He left that day because he wasn't feeling well, and he unfortunately never came back. Passed away a few weeks later. But for the period that he was, sick before he passed, nobody wanted to talk to me, or because they were also upset about this gentleman.
Yeah.
And he was a lovely human being. I'll never forget him or his name because he took a chance on me and gave me a job when I didn't really have the credentials, at least on paper, to warrant that position. And so I've had a few interesting beginning job experiences. To be honest, the Wellstar experience I kind of just chalked up to kind of apropos for.
Right, you're like, well, this seems par for the course.
That's right.
It's just we're gonna figure it out and make the best of it. And yeah, and then so I was at Wellstar for about a year. They hired a VP of Rev Cycle. At the time, I didn't go for the job. I was still trying to figure out, could I
Yeah,
do
so
this?
you weren't hired
Right.
to be the guy. You were hired to kind of take the role. So how
Yeah.
did that transpire?
Yeah, I mean, so I got down there. We started, making changes. We started, putting some structure that was kind of missing in place, and performance started to pick up. Things started to turn around. We really just didn't miss a beat. And I wasn't the interim VP, but I was really serving in that kind of role as the leader of hospital billing.
Right, because
Um,
nobody else. I mean, there was nobody in that role, so it was kind of
yeah,
like de facto.
yeah. And so, yeah, and so they hired a VP. It didn't work out with that gentleman. Wasn't just the right fit for the organization. And after that transpired, I said, all right, I've now been here a year. I can clearly do this job. I have the respect of my peers, the other AVPs. They were extremely supportive of me going for it. Again, because I had been in that sort of quasi role for the prior year and a half.
Yeah.
They gave it to me on an interim basis. I, clearly didn't do that poorly, and then found myself in the role, and we've been running since then. And I will say, we've done a lot. I mean, I could clearly rattle off some of our improvements, but every metric we would ask for and expect to be driving, we've been able to make significant improvements in. So both firms performed well from a cash standpoint, and the end result, but how we got there was not the most efficient and certainly not operating the best. So touching, accounts 100 times over, high
Sure.
denials and high churn, very much, too high in the AR, and AR over 90 was unbelievably high. And so we've just one by one put structure, organization, discipline into place and been able to drive improvements. It's been nothing fancy. We haven't, we've not embedded no new vendors, no new technology. We're just doing the work the right way and being really focused in this.
Mm-hmm.
Not the most exciting topic for a podcast, but
Well, you're
and
cleaning
people-
up is what you're doing. That's what's
Well,
important.
Building
You know?
blocks, right?
I think the hallmark of any good revenue cycle is consistency and diligence. Can you do all the things every day, even if it's not as fast as you would like, at the same pace, so that the cycle is flowing and moving? I mean, we did. I will say the biggest part of what I've done since being at Wellstar is optimize Epic. So they had not done a great job of just utilizing that tool to the best of its ability. So we've put a lot in place to just use the system and let it work for us rather than us working for it.
Yeah, right.
And we're now at a place, 2 years into this journey, where we're now looking at some technology and starting to look outside of Epic for some additional value and benefits that we can drive. Because we do feel like we've now maximized
Yeah.
that tool. Not fully, but
I get it. Yeah.
enough to where it's the right time to start looking at other solutions.
So I'd be curious, Jason, if you've done a reflection on, what out of the times where it's been rough, like what are the things that you would say this is the things that I am starting to pass on to others? Like, what's the lesson learned that you just like? Yeah, this is the thing that I really like. If I could pass on a couple things, or the tough things that I went through, like what would those be, or what are the things that you're like, I'm holding on to this because this is important. That I've taken the failure, which may or may not have been your fault, right? Like, just we all have these things. Like, what is the thing that I'm teaching others with? I'd be curious.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but particularly as leaders, consistency. I work really hard to show up as the same person every day. No one would ever know what's going on in my personal life, whether it's good or bad. And certainly at work, I approach work the same way. So when we have good news and good results, we celebrate quickly, but we expect good news and good results. We hold ourselves to an extremely high standard. And when things don't go well, the same even-keeled measure. I mean, I'll be honest, we literally right before the podcast, I had a call. We just went live with Beaker in Epic. We've had some issues on the clinical end. Not a time that we have the capacity to do a lot of rework or manual touches, but we're going to have to. And so I approach it the same way. Hey, we're going to reprioritize. We're going to focus. We're going to set timetables and expectations and a plan, and we are just going to methodically work through it. And I think setting that tone puts everyone else at ease. And so that's one thing. I think the other is you can never communicate enough. And so I spend in my role a lot of time communicating with the team. I pop into team meetings. I do skit level one-on-ones with key leaders. I feel like alignment, complete understanding of what we're doing and why is so important. And I spend a lot of time driving that message through all levels of my team. Because then they can answer their own questions. Then they understand exactly what's going on with a positive or negative situation, and they know how they fit into it and how they can operate without needing to be, managed or repeated what over. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, Ben, but those are two of the biggest things, just from a leadership standpoint. I mean, obviously, I'm Six Sigma trained, and so that, I think, not the formal process of Six Sigma, but thinking about, all of our work and setting up controls, which means, are you measuring it? Do you understand what the performance should be? And so I have a mantra, you can't measure it, you can mount it. So we make sure that we have measurements around everything. And I think that's helped tremendously through my career, because typically I'll either know that a problem's occurring as it's occurring or immediately thereafter, and certainly I'm not getting caught with surprises. But it also crystallizes expectations. So if we're measuring things, then we understand how we should be performing, and I can give expectations to the leadership team to say, hey, if we're ever performing below these levels, like, you need to escalate, you need to take a different path, a different action. And so just that thought and mentality of always measuring, always defining success has helped even when there's a problem, because if you're defining success, then you know what failure looks like.
You should put that on a coffee mug right there.
Oh, there you go.
I
T-shirt.
love a slogan. T-shirt. It's a moment. It's T-shirt moment.
Tina loves a slogan. Tina, what questions do you have? Oh, we lost Tina for a minute.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry. Oh,
Okay.
I've got Jason. He's moving.
You're back. We hear you.
Okay, good.
I said, what questions do you have for Jason?
For Jason. Well, I wonder, so you've talked about like a lot of things you've learned in your career. Does any of that trickle over into, say, parenting or coaching?
I think more from parenting helps me professionally than professional helping as a parent. My wife hates when I talk to her
about expectations.
Like I would,
measuring
one of my team members, or when I put my VP hat on, she does not like that.
Well, you're not the vice president of the house. Like, just settle down, mister.
Well, and even the funniest part is she actually works for me now. So
oh no,
what
does she? Or are you secretly working for her? Because that's what I'm thinking.
Well, that's the joke is, I'll ask her to do something, and I'll say, like, I'm asking as your VP.
Wait, she works at...
Oh, my God.
Wait, I gotta get this straight. She works at Wellstar somehow?
Yeah, in her revenue cycle at Wellstar. So,
how is that possible?
So when I was AVP, my kids got to an age where they were all in school, and she had time, and she wanted to get back to work, and because of my race and my job and the hours I put in, we needed flexibility. And so I just, was talking to people, asking, like, you guys know of anything? And the AVP of Patient Access was like, I've got the perfect thing. Complete flexibility. And so, so she got a job in Patient Access. Initially, she was doing admissions notification, so just calling patients to let, their family members know that somebody had been admitted. She's now in a special projects kind of role doing RTE mapping for us. So she's mapping insurance plan codes to RTE so we can do auto plan code assignments. In Epic, and then also benefit mapping to help point of service collections and estimate accuracy. And so because she got the job before I was promoted, I disclosed it clearly.
Obviously, right.
She was able to keep the job. We have no interaction on a day-to-day basis.
Right, yeah.
but it is very funny, and it makes for a lot of jokes in the house. So, and it won't, because people will come to me like, I just made another site. My last name's not that common, and like, you guys related, and I'll
No.
yes,
Oh, that's funny.
Wow, that's weird. I don't know her.
Yeah, I don't know. Who is
I
that?
don't know who
That's
that
weird.
is. Oh,
Is she nice?
how's she doing? How's you like think her
yeah,
work is good?
yeah.
Oh,
What's her work ethic like?
yeah.
Just a question.
You know,
No,
that's
I'm kidding.
yes.
I'm kidding. Don't answer that. That's a no.
It could be better.
It could be better. Oh, I can't
feel like
wait
I
till
should
she
put a
listens to
disclaimer
this.
right now. Our podcast
Mhm.
is not responsible for any kind of marital discomfort that comes from any conversation
None.
had
we
here.
don't, we don't offer any counseling either. You gotta go to a different podcast for that.
And she will be listening to this. So my wife is obsessed with podcasts. In fact, you guys were joking about mugs and shirts. We want to make her a shirt that says like this one time on podcast, because every other sentence she says generally starts with that. And I love Howard is amazing. She's so she's such a diverse individual. So she's been listening to such like a wide range of
Wide
podcasts
range of
and
stuff, not just crime podcasts, because that's a
Oh,
problem.
yeah. And it makes it's such interesting conversations, and she always has such like good points to bring up. But she was very excited for me to do this. She's like,
This
waiting
is awesome.
to download it. And,
Fantastic. Well, tell her there's a good one called Couples Therapy, which is hilarious. No joke. It's called Couples Therapy, and it's two comedians that are couples that's a couple, and they do. It is a riot. I don't listen all the time, but it is funny. So we've
tried to have a little fun with it. Like we both took our CRCR exam on the same day.
Oh,
and
goodness.
And passed on the same day. And so
Who said romance is dead?
Yeah,
that's right.
Who said we can't have fun and romance at the same time
in the
rev
revenue cycle.
My goal is to get her to come to a conference with me. I just have this like picture of like walking in as like this rev cycle power couple, but I don't think that'll ever happen.
It almost happened to us, Jason. It almost happened. I won't mention I don't know if I can mention their names, but there is a couple that work at the same facility. That's a similar situation, but I think her husband is like a director level. So I don't know how this worked for a long time, but it's probably similar, right? Where they were, it happened before they, whatever, so, but they almost both came to the conference. I don't know, Tina, if you remember this, but
now I'm gonna have to go to my wife and tell her like there's people ahead of us. We got some catching up to do.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, she moved out of that role.
We've got a spot for you,
yes.
Leaders Forum.
Yes.
You come. It's a small group, so you won't feel as you'll actually be able to embrace the power. We're matching outfits. It'll be great.
I know. But I have to like separate them. I mean, I don't know. We're going to figure this out. I'm at the same table. That seems weird.
It would be very weird.
Oh, that's so funny, man. I love it. I don't think I could. I love my wife. She's amazing. I don't think we could work together. Shout out to Jenny. I have had her on the podcast, though. She has been on the podcast. So
the beauty is we don't work together. She's in a Westfield, even though she gets to kind of make up her own hours, which
she's doing her own thing. She's not. She's not coming to the hospital.
And we need that flexibility. Like I'm working from home today, but I'm in the office a lot. I put in a lot of hours. With 3 young kids, our children, we have one in high school, one in middle, one in elementary, and so between doctor's appointments, before school, after school activities, it's
right.
I'm challenged to do a whole lot, and so the job's perfect. It gives her the exact flexibility we need, and she works what she wants, and she's doing great. Our RT mapping and auto plan code assignments never been higher, and
you better say that. You better say that.
Well, it's the weekend. It's the weekend, so place to hide, Jason.
That's right.
It was one of those items I mentioned earlier where we weren't utilizing what was available to us in Epic. And we've seen a nice reduction in front-end denials. We've seen a quickening of reg time. So we're shortening that reg time to provide a better service for our patients.
All right, you don't have to sell it anymore. We're good. You're good. I do have Tina, I have a good idea for a podcast, though. What if we brought Jason's wife on and my wife, and we talked about, because Jason and I, you don't know this if you listen, there's a podcast called Cleveland on here, and like in between season 1 and season 2, it's like that time frame. that I talk about my experience of taking the job where I knew immediately I shouldn't have taken the job. But I had already moved. We'd moved, our whole family. My kids are like 1 and 2. And we moved to a place where we didn't know anybody. And my wife is home. Like, she was an 8th grade teacher, and now she's home, right? Like, so it would be a good podcast to walk through, because the other side of that is like, okay, now I got to deal with the reality of we're there, I don't know. That'd be interesting. I mean, obviously, my wife and I have talked a lot about it. I've talked and told that story to a lot of people because I thought it was important people knew.
I don't know if my wife could handle the excitement of actually being on a podcast. That might be too much.
Too much. That makes it real. That's cool. Well, Jason, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I loved hearing the story. I thought it was great. Thanks for being vulnerable and honest, and I hope it didn't bring up too many memories. And I hope your marriage is okay after this, actually. That's what I hope.
I love the optimism. I mean, I just feel like,
awesome.
Knowing you're out there, Jason, making a difference and keeping it even keeled, that's, warms my heart.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been awesome connecting. It's a nice distraction from cybersecurity and
God, yes,
all kinds of challenges we're all dealing with and facing right now. And so this was a pleasure. Thank you guys all again.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Take care.